My guest in this episode is Richard Kohinga, an entrepreneurial sales and marketing leader who has spent the last 25 years working in professional services. He was with KPMG for 17 years in Australia and the Middle East, before joining a legal talent on demand firm, Plexus, in 2018, first as commercial director and now under the acquisition from Axiom as general manager, Australia. His focus throughout his career has been in driving business growth, either by using a wealth of sales and marketing skills to promote existing services or to work with the business to develop new products and services to clients. Welcome to the podcast, Richard.
Graham, great to see you again.
Now, as I've said, your career journey has taken you from Australia to the Middle East and back to Australia. You've worked with global firm KPMG. You then went to work for a startup. You're now back working with a global firm. But before we get into all the nuances of that, I'm really keen to start at the very beginning. And most people think their career starts when they do their degree. And, what do they do post-degree? You did an arts, literature and political science degree. What did you want to be?
I did. It was a while ago now. I was interested in words and big ideas. I probably wanted to be a journalist, if the truth be known. But I was lucky in that I finished my degree on exchange to Virginia Tech in the States. And they, for some reason, they put me in this dormitory with PhD rocket scientists. And I was totally fish out of water there, but they were hatching big ideas about how to, put rockets on Mars. And I often reflect back on that because innovation, technology, how to do things better has always been in the back of my mind for, the different roles that I've been lucky enough to step into. And I wonder whether that was an influence.
Did you ever find yourself hearing yourself say it's not rocket science and sort of quietly smiling to yourself?
I have done that. And it's a bit of a brag, isn't it, to say that you work with rocket scientists. But the funny thing about rocket scientists is their ability to focus. So they are incredibly specialized in the way they can look at big problems, but they can also be really dumb in something that might be quite obvious to someone else. And so when I've worked with some super smart people, and I've often had that in the back of my mind as well, just because someone's really smart at one thing doesn't mean that they're smart at everything.
Yeah. So you came back from your study, and what was your first real job? Like, what did you get into first?
It was media management. So I didn't become a journalist. I was the other side, which was managing journalists, or certainly encouraging them to take up story ideas, proactive media and crisis management in GE, then in government. And again, you never know where things lead you. That anyone who's got that background, they know that there's a sales element to it, right? You're pitching ideas. You're reaching out to TV networks and newspaper editors, suggesting this is a take that you should run with. And again, that was an incredibly valuable skill that I was able to deploy in areas I never thought I would, but it's a sales skill.
How did it take you to KPMG?
Well, often those communication units are embedded in marketing teams, right? So marketing comms. And I looked across the fence at the marketers who I was working with. Comms people can often be tactically brilliant, but the marketing people can be a little bit more structured project management in their approach. And I admired that. So I did a master's degree in marketing and became a marketer. And so then when with that background, I was presented with the opportunity to join a pursuits team at KPMG. So that's how I joined KPMG, was in proposals writing.
When you joined KPMG in 2001, did you imagine for a moment that you would be there for 17 years?
It's a long time, Graham, when you put it like that. Obviously, as a child genius, right? I started my career at 13 or 14 or something. No, look, I didn't. But it was the perfect place for me because I'd worked in financial services, which very commercial, very money orientated, and then government, which was very, people who were really passionate about what they were doing. And KPMG brought the best of those two things together for me. I worked with people who were really passionate about what they were doing, but just so professional and so skilled at it.
You've been in 7 years at the beginning of your career. You'd started off in communications and media. You'd then done a master's in marketing. You'd moved into more of a marketing role. And then you joined KPMG in Pursuits, which is very sales. Already in that 7 years, you'd sort of tried your hands or started to try your hand at a few things. Were you at that time, if you can remember, were you really conscious of what you wanted to be? Or were you really just organically going after the things that looked good at the time?
I think the key word is open.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very open-minded about what the world could offer and what doors I could step through. And then you do look at the world through different lenses, and one of them was, well, wouldn't it be great to travel a global organisation in 155 countries? That would probably open up some opportunities. So I'd spent some time overseas. So, and it was also the way it was pitched in. I think it's right. Those Pursuits role, if you have a communications background, so you can craft messages, but you have a marketing background, so you can, design strategy. You pull those two things together, and you're really well placed to help in that pursuit space, which proved to be the case.
And you were with them for a decade in Melbourne. Melbourne's one of the most amazing cities, as we know. I'm from Melbourne. But you then transferred, and I find this remarkable, you transferred to Bahrain and Qatar. And they were not places at that time that were very common places for people to go and often have an expat sort of career. And so why did you go with KPMG to Bahrain and Qatar? How did that even manifest itself?
I think I've got a great wife. I think that's the first thing. And we had, there was an opportunity in New Zealand that we had thought about. And she said, well, with Australia and New Zealand, they're quite similar, aren't they? It didn't bring the different type of cultural experience that she was after. Then I did a stint in Hong Kong. I don't know if I've mentioned that, but I was seconded to Hong Kong with KPMG to redesign their Pursuits practice over there. Mm-hmm. And we got a flavour for working in different cultures and with people, with different backgrounds. So when this opportunity presented itself, it was funny, I was speaking to the office managing partner at the time in Melbourne. He said, look, go and treat it as a sabbatical. That was his language. He said, go over there, learn a few things, and we'll see you in 12 months. And so it was a tremendous, and I was continued to be employed by the Melbourne office. So KPMG was so supportive of creating opportunities, for their people. And so there was, I know it might sound a bit risky now, but I didn't actually see it as risky at the time. I actually saw it as an opportunity to do a whole lot of things that maybe life wouldn't have given me otherwise. Certainly back then, I know KPMG is different now, but back then, a lot of the support, and I was the Melbourne, sales and marketing guy, but a lot of the roles were quite supportive of the professionals who are out there earning revenue and building out the business. And you did feel like you're in a support role rather than being a direct contributor.
Right.
So when I caught up with the managing partner in the Middle East, he said, no, you're full-time out, walking the corridors of our clients and we see you, growing your career that way. And I said, great.
Let's take our first deep dive here. I want to reflect on the reasons why he decided to uproot his and his family's life to move from Melbourne to Bahrain. His approach is one I applaud, in that he backed himself. He saw it as a sabbatical, not a forever move, and it paid off for his career, not just in terms of working with different cultures, but also in having his role fast-tracked from a support role to a client engagement role, something that would have taken him longer to achieve at that time in Australia. When working with candidates who are looking at overseas opportunities, we always encourage them to look beyond the job description and have faith that your life and career can be enhanced just by being somewhere new and different. Let's return to the interview to hear how he got on.
So how was the Middle East? I mean, you got there. I mean, I've never been, so I can't really imagine, but you've left Melbourne and you arrive in the Middle East. You're charged with the responsibility of helping them build out a BD and marketing function and a sales function. How do you even begin to start doing that? Like, what did you do to begin that journey?
I should write a book because it was, I really should, because it's such a fascinating part of the world, not only because, Muslim people are wonderful people, interesting people, the people who come across from India and the subcontinent, and of course the wonderful Levant communities. So you're just engaging with these fascinating communities who taught you so much about the world. But on top of that, you had these various American and Australian and European expats all in this melting pot, trying to transform these new nation states. And I actually shifted. I was working in Bahrain, but I lived in Qatar, where the World Cups has been held. And life-changing opportunity, Graham, because of the projects that we were able to work on and support. And the funny thing about, I was reflecting on this when I got back, the difference between the developing world and the developed world is their appetite for to adopt innovation. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where they can leapfrog developed nations. Because I would say to them, hey, there's this thing because I got the opportunity to travel to 20 or 30 countries while I was there, right, with KPMG. And I'd say, look, they're doing this thing in Germany. They'd say, great, let's do it. Let's roll it out. Cut me a check. And there was this openness to, which is actually odd, because some people might think that the Middle East is a very conservative place, and perhaps in some ways it is. But certainly in terms of their business community, really open to new ideas. And I found myself in the perfect place, because there were, there was technologies and there was business practices, that global best practices that we could roll out to, some wonderfully open-minded CEOs.
Were there any challenges? I mean, I'm sure there were, but are there any that stick out for you now that you've been back a while? Were there any times when you just thought, this is too hard, I can't do this, or this is really outside my comfort zone?
Nearly every day. So it's interesting. A lot of Western expats, they would roll in and roll out within 2 years. Mm-hmm. So they would find it took tremendous resilience to be able to navigate these different cultures and different ways of doing things. Not that I'm trying to make out I'm the super resilient person, but maybe I was really lucky in life because I travelled a lot as a kid. My dad had different jobs. We travelled right around Australia and New Zealand. I went to, 10 plus schools. And so I was able to roll with some of the things which bowled other people over. I mean, just tiny things, go into a government building to try and get a license and you're still there 6 hours later, or crazy traffic, or I'd say I should write a book, but I should do it under a synonym, because some of the things you saw. But then you'd have some great highs. A gentleman called Jamal Fakro, who was the managing partner of the Bahrain practice, who I have tremendous respect for. He knew how to celebrate success. Mm-hmm. And so when we would have a big win, he would pull people together. We would break bread. We would just enjoy what we'd achieved together. Mm-hmm. And that was, that's just stuck with me. That'll stick with me for life. I will always stop and say to my team, hey, don't forget what you just did then. That was an amazing thing, and let's celebrate it.
So you were there many years, I think 7 in total, weren't you?
Yeah.
And then you came back to Melbourne. If I remember at the time, you came back to a contract role in Melbourne for KPMG, because they didn't have a role at the level that you'd been at previously. And how did you feel at that time in your career? You'd had this great success in the Middle East. You're now back in Melbourne, completely different culture, and you're in a contract job. How were you feeling at that moment about where your career was going?
It was a really tough year. So I was the acting head of markets in Victoria for a lovely lady who'd gone on a maternity leave. But it was a holding pattern really, because I was managing her portfolio of responsibilities. Plus, they may well have remembered me as Richard from 7 years ago, where Richard had transformed himself, and so it was a frustrating time. But maybe that's what I needed to move on to another career in another business, or it might be 20-something years with KPMG, right? So sometimes you need a little bit of a push.
Yeah.
But even at that time, I worked for Rob Bazzani. He is just a wonderful chairman, and he was so open. And he said, you've travelled to all these countries, you've seen amazing things. Roll it out. Go and challenge people. So I did that. And one of the areas was in technology and around contract management and the innovation around the pursuits process, which I had seen in other parts of the world, which then led to conversations with Plexus.
Yeah. I mean, I remember at the time when I was working with Plexus to help find them a head of BD, and they were relatively small at the time. You were coming from this big sort of behemoth of KPMG. You were really interested. I remember being quite surprised that because you'd had this illustrious, massive career, and you and I started talking about you possibly joining Plexus. You were really gung-ho for that opportunity. You were really enthusiastic. What was it about them or the job or that moment in time that just really, that momentum for you got you going to take on that challenge with them?
I think it was three things. One is I'd already been pursuing business opportunities to actually create my own business with a technology focus to it. And so this seemed, oddly enough, less risky because I was joining a business that had, were 7 or 8 years into their technology journey, and, they were well established. The second thing is I wanted to run my own P&L. I wanted to be a business owner, and that opportunity was presented to me. And the third was the people. I was so impressed by Anna Maherd, who was the general manager at the time, who I was going to report through to, just a fabulous professional. Oddly enough, Axiom, which is where I've now arrived. Andy Mellett is a great entrepreneur and inspirational guy. So it was. I just felt like I had really landed on my feet. Working in technology, in the law, with super smart people.
There's quite a bit to observe here. Firstly, his experience re-entering a market he had left and trying to adjust after what he calls his reinvention, and subsequently having a really tough year. His time spent wondering what next, when, interestingly, his next opportunity was right in front of him. He received great advice from the partner who said, "Take what you've learned and roll it out here." This is advice we give to candidates when they are feeling stuck in a role, but are working for a firm that needs their skills. Sometimes you have to remind the business what you can do, what you can deliver, what ideas you have. The next ideal role could actually be one you have to create for yourself, either at your current firm, for yourself, or another business. And it's not uncommon for moments like this to be the genesis of an independent consulting career, or taking on a different type of role to the ones you've held before.
Several of your roles up until that point had been sort of startup. Even though you were at KPMG, when you went to KPMG Middle East, it was a startup function. You were creating function. Then you went to Plexus and you were very much charged with helping them build and grow something. How do you attack startup roles? Like, what advice do you give to people who are faced with going into an organization and starting up something from scratch? How do you approach that?
That's a great question. I was in the Middle East. I had wonderful sponsors. So the head of the management consulting group and the managing partner. And we were able to prioritize, what could get done. You can't boil the ocean. I had these 20-odd partners who had 20 different visions of how, I could grow out the markets function. And so we were able to say, no, if we can just do these 2 or 3 things and do them well, then that can become the beachhead through which other things can be tackled. I should also note, people was sometimes wondering why I stuck at that job for 7 years. That's a long time, right? But it evolved. And so we fixed one problem, then we fixed another problem, then we built this, we built that. And my encouragement to people at the beginning of I have met people who 6 months in, they go, okay, I need my next big challenge. And I'm like, well, what have you actually achieved? Well, no offense, but what have you achieved? Because it's great things take time to build out, and that's just the way that the world works. And so I think being able to stick at it and partner with good people who've got your back, because you don't win every day. And I've had, and I think about the opportunity at Plexus and now Axiom. That's been the same story. I'm in my 5th year in terms of running the secondment business. And I did say to Andy, when I joined, I said, you might like me year 1, a little bit. Year 2, you'll like me a lot. Year 3, I'll be indispensable. And a bit of a brag there. But what I was really trying to do was buy myself some time, right? Get through year 1. But I think it was also about saying to him, I'll just all these little 2% of improvements. And so I think startups are about sticking at it. It's just sticking at it, because you'll just keep getting better and better.
Transformation is a big part now of professional services. I mean, they're transforming at a rapid rate, both on the legal side, the consulting side, the engineering side. Every single business that I work with in professional services is going through a major change. And the people who work in sales, marketing, business development are often at the forefront or very involved in that. So the roles are very transformational in their nature, which is uncomfortable for some people. Where do you get the energy from to keep going in a role which you know that every 6 to 12 months is going to be different to the role that you started?
I think I would struggle if it wasn't different. I think there can be a Groundhog Day element to sales roles, and that you're wanting to build something, you want to craft something, and so part of it is about wanting to create value for your clients you really care for, and when they are benefiting from what you're helping them, and it's that human side of it. Part of it is about the opportunities that you create for your team. And that can be really fulfilling, right? If you see someone develop a skill they didn't have, or succeed, and you can share in their success. But one of the great partners I worked for in the Middle East, when asked that question, he talked about having medium and short-term and long-term goals. And he said if he didn't have that, he couldn't get through the week, because some of his weeks were horrendous. Mm-hmm. But he was able to look ahead and go, but in 6 months' time, and I would have solved this problem, or I would have built out this function and taken tremendous pride and satisfaction from that. Mm. And so I do feel like my observation is the most successful people I've worked for have had a vision of where they wanted to take their career, take the organisation that they were responsible for, for helping to grow, and the people around them, they've taken them somewhere, right? Mm. And I do wonder about how our phones can steal our ability to stop and think and ponder, right? Mm. How to make the world a better place. Mm. Because you've got to be able to have that vision of where you're heading personally, but also where you're wanting to take the business, where you're working. Mm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes loads of sense. And you also changed sector when you left KPMG and went to Plexus, which was really focused on the legal industry, and you'd never worked in the legal industry before, and it's a very complex industry. How did you approach the change of sector? What did you do to get up to speed with that sector? Because we have a lot of people who change sectors or want to change sectors in their career, and the question I always get asked is, how do I get up to speed when I change a different sector? So what did you do?
The Plexus business leverages the challenger sale, which is really based which the sales model, which is based around starting client conversations with insights into what their key challenges and issues are likely to be, which is drawn from research which they had collated. That then enabled you to have conversations with clients that really got to their key challenges, what was keeping them awake at night, and then listening. because these can be my core client base are general counsels and heads of legal, at in-house legal teams in government, private sector across Australia. They can be quite isolated, those roles. So if you can talk to them about what others are focusing in on in terms of their, the big challenges that they're solving, bring that insight, but also listen and be pastoral almost in the way that you engage them and show empathy, then you're someone who they can really lean on. And then you don't have, not that you have all the solutions in play, right? Often it's about connecting them to others who can help, or sharing them, solutions that others have discovered. But it would be an exaggeration to say I did 6 months worth of planning, stepping into that first role, and started a law degree. Or no, it was really coming up with a clear roadmap of how they go about their business and what's probably holding them back, how others are solving for that, and then being able to share that insight in quite a specific way that then led to me constantly as they answered, expanding my understanding of their business.
So quite time intensive from a sales process.
Yeah, but there's formulas that you can draw on to enable you to do that. And often those formulas are really helpful because they structure how you ask questions, so then you can spend more of your time listening to what they've actually said. And that engagement, you go.
Yeah, you go.
Well, and it's in listening that you actually can then synthesize all of these different conversations that you have, and you have genuine knowledge. And so you're bringing that insight into those relationships. And yeah, of course, it's time intensive, but what else would you be doing? Other than spending time with your clients, talking to them about their business. I mean, what better use of your time and the power that can generate in terms of your ability to offer value and help them with their business.
There's no doubt listening to this interview that Richard has been successful, both for himself, but more importantly for the businesses that have hired him, by being client-facing and strategically listening. If there are any BD or salespeople listening to this who still have to convince their firms to let them be client-facing, then the last 2 minutes should convince them. I love it when he says, "But what else would you be doing?" The power of listening to clients enables you to add more value to their business.
At this point, you'd worked in sales with KPMG for 17 plus years, and then you went to Plexus. You talk about the challenger sales model. Was that the first time you'd come across a robust sales methodology?
No, I was Miller Hyman trained with KPMG, and I facilitated that methodology in training programs to partners and directors across the Middle East and South Asia. So, and it's interesting because they had two different approaches. People can be a Miller Hyman person, or they can be a challenger person. I actually see the best in both methodologies. And all we're talking about is structured thinking. So how can you create structures around how to better, find value, how to articulate that, how to build relationships? It's all, a lot of this overlaps. And there's a lot of it. I was going to say it's not rocket science, but I shouldn't do that. Should I, Graham? But I didn't find them as competing strategies or anything like that. It's just different ways to have thoughtful conversations.
You've worked in various professional services firms, and professional services have become a lot more sales focused and sales orientated. What culture do you think makes for a good sales environment in professional services?
I feel like if you can measure something, if you can hold people, be very clear about what it is you need them to do, and you can measure their performance so that they know what they need to do, then you've got the building blocks of a great sales culture. And Salesforce, which is what the system Axiom deploys, really enables that. So that when we think about how do you measure your return on your investment of your time and energy of your sales team? Well, you're able to track their contribution to the pipeline. So did they originate a lead, an opportunity? Did they, have they actually met that client? Have they created a qualified opportunity out of that meeting? Have they converted it? So if you've got a dashboard where you can track that and look at everyone's contribution, then there's no hiding. And what's more important is that people can be recognised for their efforts. I do feel like there's some consistency, whatever your methodology might be. If you deploy it consistently, then everyone's speaking the same language, and that's super helpful. But then the final thing would be, how much time are they actually spending with their clients? And so which is how those metrics can help you. They can actually very clearly now. I mean, I remember 10, 15 years ago, it was very difficult to work out who met who and how and when, and how many emails have they sent out, how many phone calls have they made. That's all trackable, right?
Yeah.
And not in a big stick way, but just trying to help understand where people are deploying their time.
Now, you spend a lot of time with clients and with general counsel in the legal industry. So I'm really curious to know what your thoughts are or what your predictions are for the future of the legal industry, because it's undergoing so much change and there's so much commentary around it. It would be a loss not to ask you that question.
And it's been driven by technology, but also the disruption from the epidemic and how that's still playing out in terms of where people are, how they're going about their jobs and where they're working from. So we've come out of this very busy and frantic and time of great change, but surely it's going to ramp up, right? So it's really around technology and AI and how that's going to be deployed to support, in my case, in-house legal teams. Surely it's going to shake things up. And it's funny, we've been watching this, in the Plexus space for years, thinking, well, the technology has promised a lot, but often delivered very little. But I do feel like we're on the cusp of something quite significant in terms of how people's jobs are going to be delivered. And we're moving from how they review documents and process documents to how they actually make judgments and decisions, and how that can be supported. I don't think people's jobs are going away. I'm not suggesting that. It's more about what skills then become more valuable. So if you don't need to hold a whole lot of information in your head anymore because there's the computers can support that, then what is valuable? What is going to be harder for an AI function to deliver on? And it's people skills, right? So it's going to be the ability to create a network, engage people, present your personality, sell, lead people, be inspirational, all these people type elements that we're not always promoted on, which, I mean, they're in the mix, but I feel like those sales skills and leadership skills are going to be even more valued going forward.
Do you think that that professional services are investing enough in developing leadership skills and sales skills and client-facing skills?
The short answer is I don't know. My suspicion is that the industry can be late adopters, and we could talk all day about why that might be. So it's it could be that some of this change is thrust upon legal services rather than originated from. And so I would really be encouraging, and I look, all of the leaders that I speak to, and in terms of GCs, are thinking about how they can deliver more value, transform their teams, deploy new technology, right? So they're interested and they're turning up to thought leadership forums to explore that. And so I'm really confident that there will be a faster adoption of new technologies going forward. But not just the technology. A lot of what change management about is not so much about the technology, but how you you collaborate with your peers and other business units to get things done. And I do feel I'm really optimistic that certainly if I think about my business, Axiom, how we're working with our clients right across the world to help them think about doing things differently and to share the insights about what people are doing in different markets. There's a huge appetite for that.
How do you think it will affect careers? I mean, you've had a very brilliant career so far and a very motivational one for people listening. What do you think are the career opportunities for other sales professionals who are sort of at the beginning of their career?
I think it's the perfect time to be in a sales role. I really do. I feel like you're going to get so much support, right? The bane of a salesperson's life is the amount of admin that they can get clawed back into by the people who need to collect data. Well, that's disappearing, and you can really focus on what often are your great strengths, which is connecting to people. I think it's a wonderful time to be in a sales role. I feel like the word sales is no longer, it's a word that people embrace, right? And because ultimately revenue growth is critical to the survival and making sure organisations flourish. So no, I think it's a great time to be in sales. It's going to be a time of great change, and but this generation of young leaders coming through, young professionals coming through, who are better placed in terms of their ability to just roll with it and embrace new ideas and different ways of doing things. I do wonder whether the people working remotely, it's deprived people of that opportunity to be coached and led by others and mirror off others. And so I'm hopeful that we arrive at a happy medium where people are in the office a little bit more and given that opportunity to. I've worked for some amazing people, and I've just been. I've tried to clone myself off them in terms of how they go about their jobs, and if I didn't see it, right, I wouldn't be able to do that. You can't just send someone an email. You actually have to watch how they answer a tricky question and present the perfect answer.
You've learned a lot in your career, it sounds, and you continue to learn. Thinking back to when you left university, what advice would you have given yourself at that point about the career you're about to have?
Well, I think two things. One is navigate towards positive people. The amount of time in my life I've wasted trying to to support people who have a negative view or don't want to get something done or don't want to be there. But then on the other hand, how much I've been inspired by people who are charismatic and want to make the world a better place. So I wish I'd spent less time with people who weren't taking me forward. The other thing, which is more positive, is I've been so open. I've just said, bring it on, and that's been. I'm sure I've stepped through doors that others may not have.
Yeah.
I do remember going to the Middle East. People saying, "What on earth are you doing? You're living in the world's greatest city, working for the most wonderful organisation." But yet that led to such an amazing opportunity for myself and my family.
Well, it's been fantastic spending time with you. You said that one of the pieces of advice you would give yourself is spend time with positive people. We've certainly enjoyed spending half an hour with one of the most positive people in professional services. I've always enjoyed our conversations. It's fantastic to see you. And thank you so much for sharing your career with us today.
Thank you, Graham.